I began to cooperate with the government in 1991. I decided to cooperate before we, meaning me, John Gotti, and our acting Muslier, Frank Locascio, went to trial.
Number 10. Max Mermelstein, Medellin Cartel. Florida-based engineer and smuggler Max Mermelstein was a key player in the Medellin cartel's American operations. After his arrest in 1985, he provided one of the U.S. government's first major blows against the organization. Mermelstein's testimony brought indictments against Pablo Escobar, Fabio Ochoa Vasquez, and others. At the time, he was the most valuable informant in American history.
The government had no idea, and honest to God, if it wasn't for Max Mermelstein,
I don't think they would have ever caught us.
Escobar put out a $3 million bounty for Mermelstein, who was protected by the Witness Protection Program. Mermelstein was still under protection when he died of cancer 15 years after the cartel's dissolution. Betraying the world's most notorious drug syndicate cost him his family and his very identity. This sacrifice surely wasn't the worst decision of his life. Number 9. Joseph the Ear Massino, Bonanno crime family. Joseph Massino turned the Bonanno family into one of the most powerful mafia of the new millennium. He was so scrupulous that he ordered colleagues to refer to him by tugging their ears, in case the FBI was bugging their meetings.
It was clear that he was somebody that had his wits about him and was a master of his craft.
But with made men naming him in a RICO case in 2004, the Ear was facing the death penalty. He thus became the first boss in the history of New York's 5 families to turn state's evidence.
It had taken 20 long years, but the FBI had finally convinced Massino's crew to turn against him.
Of course, Massino didn't testify until 2011 when he aided in the conviction of his successor, Vincent Basciano. Following another testimony, his life sentence was reduced to time served in 2013. The so-called last Don lived the last decade of his life as a free man.
That was quintessentially Joe Massino. Massino was always about making the smart move and ensuring his survival.
Number 8. Joseph Joe Cargo Valachi, Genovese crime family. Though the Italian-American Mafia hid in plain sight, the Code of Omerta forbade members from so much as acknowledging its existence. Joseph Valachi set the record straight in 1963 when the Genovese grunt was suspected of ratting in prison. He killed an inmate erroneously believed to be a hitman. This ironically put Valachi at the mercy of federal authorities. It's uncertain if he turned informant strictly out of self-preservation or genuine disillusionment. Either way, the televised Valachi hearings revealed the inner workings of the Cosa Nostra.
You live by the gun and by the knife, and you die by the gun and by the knife.
Valachi did not directly implicate any colleagues, but provided law enforcement with unprecedented intel in their war on organized crime. He lived the rest of his life and wrote his memoirs in the security of a Texas prison. Number 7. Michael Mikey Scars DiLeonardo, Gambino crime family. During the Gambino family's restructuring after John Gotti's conviction, Michael DiLeonardo was made a captain. He became a top earner in the Gotti's inner circle until both the feds and the family charged him with being a crook. DiLeonardo decided to take some men down with him. He testified in court 15 times more than any made man in Mafia history. This led to some 80 convictions, including several of the Gottis and their closest associates. He even directly implicated the heads of the Colombo family. DiLeonardo is further distinguished by his personal honesty. In interviews, he recognizes his courageous testimony as an act of betrayal and weakness. At least DiLeonardo walks free, albeit in witness protection.
My whole life, I hated rats. Who wanted to be associated with a rat? I become what I hate.
Number 6. Abe Kid Twist Reilly's, Murder Inc. The contract syndicate Murder Inc. was a favorite among American gangs in need of a hitman. Abe Reilly's himself could use an ice pick to simulate a cerebral hemorrhage. When the law finally caught up with him in 1940, he adopted a different method of execution. Reilly's testified against many of his fellow hitmen and their clients, some of whom received the death penalty. After being scheduled to testify against the Gambino family, Reilly's fell to his death from a hotel window while under police protection. A grand jury's conclusion that he was attempting to escape is still in question. Number 5. Henry Hill, Lucchese crime family. Despite being barred from official membership because of his Irish heritage, Henry Hill was a close associate of the Lucchese crime family. This made him a great asset after his arrest for drug trafficking in 1980.
Henry Hill did everything he could to make it out of Normalville and into organized crime. For some 20 years, he lived the mob life until May of 1980, when it all came to a crashing halt.
Already concerned that he was marked for death, Hill provided the FBI with extensive evidence and testimony. He ensured 50 convictions, then spent the next 7 years moving around the U.S. in witness protection. But the whole world would remember this low-level mobster's name.
I knew I was a dead man no matter how you cut it. If I stayed in prison, I was dead. If I went out in the street, I was dead. So, so my choice was already made.
Hill's story was the focus of the best-selling book Wise Guy and Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas, one of the most popular gangster films ever made. Hill finally became big time, though was not respected for it.
To me, being a gangster was better than being president of the United States.
Number 4. James Whitey Bulger, Winter Hill Gang. The brutal leader of the Winter Hill Gang openly terrorized Boston for years. How did he get away with it for so long? In 1975, James Whitey Bulger agreed to become an FBI informant without facing criminal charges. This allowed him to cripple rival gangs, while protecting his own from the authorities. But in 1994, public exposure of this corrupt deal forced Whitey to go on the run.
Bulger skipped town, first with girlfriend Teresa Stanley. But when she got homesick, Bulger dropped her off and picked up Catherine Gregg, another girlfriend. They vanished for 16 years.
He was captured in 2011 and ultimately convicted on 31 counts.
His conviction is a moment savored by the families of his victims who thought this day would never come.
One of the FBI's highest assets ended up being one of their most notorious fugitives ever. The cold-blooded Bulger never ratted on himself, though. In 2018, the 89-year-old was beaten to death in prison.
Now, 2 Massachusetts men with ties to the Mafia, Freddie Geese, seen here, and Paul DiCollegiero, are charged with murdering him. A third man, Sean McKinnon, is accused of being the lookout.
Number 3. Frank Lucas, Independent. With the Mafia controlling New York's narcotics market, Frank Lucas was an industry unto himself.
Frank Lucas had it knocked because not only did he have the Italian Mafia on his side, but he also had the NYPD, an incredibly corrupt organization in the early 1970s, protecting him.
The Kingpin was known for personally smuggling his product from the Golden Triangle. Still, for all his power and elusiveness, Lucas was sentenced to 70 years for trafficking in 1976.
And all of his assets worth $37 million are seized. They include an office building in Detroit, apartments in Los Angeles, Miami, Puerto Rico, and Harlem, and bank accounts in the Cayman Islands.
He soon turned on his colleagues. By the time his sentence was reduced to time served, in '81, Lucas was responsible for more than 100 convictions. He was himself convicted of dealing again 3 years later. Lucas's story as criminal underdog and rat is truly one of a kind.
Lucas gave significant information. I'm not saying he gave everything he knew, but he gave, I'm going to say, maybe 60% of what he knew.
Denzel Washington immortalized him in pop culture in the acclaimed film American Gangster. But Lucas's significance on both sides of the war on drugs goes beyond cinematic.
Let me ask you this. Do you really think that putting me behind bars is going to change anything on them streets? Them dope fiends are going to shoot it, they're going to steal from it, they're going to die for it. Putting me in or out ain't going to change one thing.
Number 2, Tommaso Buscetta, Sicilian Mafia. Dubbed the boss of two worlds, Tommaso Buscetta was indispensable in the Sicilian Mafia's US and Brazilian operations. He remained loyal throughout a 10-year sentence, but with a gang war that claimed several loved ones, he became disillusioned. In 1984, Buscetta began informing Italian and American authorities of the Cosa Nostra's inner workings. He testified during the historic Maxi trial and was spurred by an assassination attempt to expose political ties. This led to nearly 400 convictions that devastated an international criminal empire. A story this cinematic naturally inspired a hit biopic in 2019's The Traitor. Though Buscetta spent most of his life in hiding, perhaps that sacrifice atoned for some of his earlier crimes. Number 1, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, Gambino crime family.
This isn't somebody talking about the Mafia. I am part of it.
John Gotti led the Gambino family as one of the most powerful and ruthless figures in modern organized crime. He couldn't have done it without Sammy Gravano's often brutal support. But after the Gambino leader's arrest in a raid, the FBI revealed wiretap recordings of Gotti questioning his underboss's integrity. This convinced the Bull to become the first high-ranking New York mafioso to turn state's evidence.
I began to cooperate with the government in 1991. I decided to cooperate before we, meaning me, John Gotti, and our acting Muslier, Frank Locascio, went to trial.
His testimony sealed the Teflon Don's conviction on 13 counts in 1992. Galvano later was busted as part of a drug ring. By the time he left prison again in 2017, interviews and a biography had made him a celebrity. He is now a legit public figure, showing that there is life after bringing down the toughest gangsters.
Yep. Well, then, absolutely. And no one would know better than you.
What are your favorite stories of gangland treachery? Tell all in the comments.
What you want? I want what you got, Uncle Frank. I want to be you.
Check out these other clips from Watch Mojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.